It all started on a calm summer morning when the air was warm, the lake was perfectly still, and for once, everything felt peaceful. My property stretched out over several acres, including the beautiful lake that sat right behind my house. It was quiet, private, and most importantly, mine. I bought this land years ago, long before the surrounding houses and the HOA ever existed. I had the deed, the survey, and every document proving the lake was entirely within my boundaries. It was my escape from everything, the kind of place where I could just sit in a kayak and forget the world existed. But that peace didn't last long, because a new neighbor moved in down the street, and of course, her name was Karen. At first, she seemed harmless. She'd wave when passing by, stop to make small talk about lawn care or local events, the kind of neighbor you could tolerate if you didn't talk too long. But it didn't take more than a week for her true colors to show. One Saturday, I was out swimming in my lake, just floating near the dock, when I heard someone shouting, "Excuse me! Excuse me!" I turned to see Karen standing at the edge of my property, hands on her hips, wearing oversized sunglasses and a sun hat. "You can't do that!" she yelled. I was confused. "Do what?" I called back. "Swim in the lake," she said, like she was correcting a child. I blinked. "It's my lake, Karen." She shook her head. "No, it's community property. The HOA maintains it now. Didn't you get the notice?" I swam back to shore, dripping wet and irritated. "What notice?" I asked. She pulled a folded paper from her tote bag and waved it at me like it was a royal decree. It was in last month's newsletter. The HOA has designated the lake as a shared natural area for all residents. I couldn't help but laugh. "Karen, that's cute, but this lake isn't part of the HOA. It's privately owned. You can check the county records." Her expression changed immediately. "That's not possible. The HOA owns all common spaces, and the lake is clearly within our neighborhood boundaries." I shrugged. "Your boundaries might end at the sidewalk, but my property line doesn't. The HOA doesn't own any of this." She scoffed, muttered something about selfish homeowners, and stormed off. I figured that was the end of it. The next week, I got a letter from the HOA in my mailbox. It was official looking, with their logo and everything. "Notice of violation," it read. "Unauthorized use of community property. Fine, $1,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. They were fining me for swimming in my own lake. I called the number listed on the letter and got connected to the HOA president, who, unsurprisingly, was none other than Karen herself. "You can't be serious," I said as soon as she answered. "You fined me for using my own property." She sounded smug, like she'd been waiting for this call. "The lake is part of the community ecosystem, and all residents must comply with HOA rules regarding its use." I took a deep breath. "Karen, listen carefully. The HOA was established 5 years ago. I've owned this land for 12. The lake is on my deed. It's private." There was silence for a moment, then she said, "We'll see about that." I hung up and decided it was time to get things straight. I drove to the county records office the next morning and got a copy of the original property map and deed. It showed, in clear, unmistakable lines, that the lake sat entirely within my parcel. There wasn't even an inch that touched HOA property. I took photos, printed copies, and even had it notarized. Then I sent it all to the HOA via certified mail. A week passed without a response. Then, just when I thought it was done, I saw something that made my blood boil. Karen had organized a small group of neighbors by the lake, setting up folding chairs and even putting up a sign that said Community Lake Access Area. I stood there watching them unload coolers, kids splashing in the water, and someone even trying to fish near my dock. I walked down and called out, "This is private property. You all need to leave." Karen turned, fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, come on," she said. "We're just enjoying the community lake. Don't be so territorial." "Karen, you're trespassing," I said. "I have every legal right to remove you." One of the dads looked uncomfortable, started gathering his things, but Karen doubled down. "You can't kick us out. I already told the HOA this lake is open to residents." I pointed to the property marker post sticking out of the ground a few feet away. "See that's the boundary. Everything past that is mine. You're trespassing on private land." She crossed her arms. "Fine," she said, "but you'll be hearing from the HOA." Sure enough, the next day I got another letter, same logo, same signature from Karen. Refusal to comply with community guidelines. Additional fine, $1,000. That was the last straw. I wasn't going to let some self-appointed neighborhood tyrant try to take over my property. I called my attorney, who happened to be an old friend, and explained everything. He laughed so hard he could barely speak. "They fined you for using your own lake, that's gold. Don't worry, we'll handle it." Within a week, he drafted a formal cease and desist letter addressed to the HOA, demanding an immediate withdrawal of all fines and public acknowledgement that the lake was private. It also included a subtle warning: any further false claims of ownership would constitute harassment and property interference under state law. Karen received the letter on a Friday. By Saturday morning, the community lake sign was gone, and the chairs had vanished. But, of course, she didn't apologize. Instead, she tried to save face by sending a clarification email to the entire neighborhood. She claimed there had been a misunderstanding regarding property lines and that the HOA would be re-evaluating access rights. What she didn't mention was that I'd already filed paperwork to update the HOA's annual budget allocation. See, the HOA's bylaws had a small clause 1 that Karen had probably never read carefully that required landowners within the association boundaries to pay maintenance fees proportional to land size and property access. And since Karen had falsely declared the lake community property, I decided to take her claim literally and propose a new assessment to account for lake maintenance costs. At the next HOA meeting, I presented the documentation. "If the HOA insists the lake is shared property," I said calmly, "then its maintenance, insurance, and liability costs should be reflected in the budget." Karen's face drained of color as I continued. The board had no choice but to approve the motion since she had publicly claimed the lake as part of the HOA. The result: every member's fees, including Karen's, went up by $5,000 annually. I didn't have to say a word as the room filled with murmurs of outrage. Neighbors turned on her instantly, demanding answers. Karen tried to stammer her way through an explanation, but the damage was done. The board voted to rescind the community lake designation entirely and issued a formal apology to me for the misunderstanding. The next day, Karen avoided eye contact when she saw me by the mailbox. I just smiled, nodded, and said, "Beautiful day for a swim, isn't it?" That was the last time she ever mentioned the lake again. After the fiasco with Karen and her ridiculous claim that my lake was community property, I thought the matter was settled. The HOA had backed off after realizing they'd walked straight into a legal trap, and for a while, peace returned. I spent most mornings on my dock with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the water, feeling that deep calm only nature can bring. But as anyone who has dealt with a Karen before knows, they don't learn. They just wait for their next opportunity to cause chaos. And sure enough, mine wasn't done yet. It started when I noticed her walking along the edge of the lake with a clipboard in hand. She was taking photos, muttering to herself, and occasionally pointing toward the water. I called out, "You lose something." She didn't even look at me. "Just documenting violations," she said. I frowned. Violations of what? She turned, her fake polite smile firmly in place. The HOA board has decided to review all shared environmental resources. There have been complaints about unapproved dock modifications. I stared at her for a long moment. "Karen, the HOA has no jurisdiction here. You're trespassing again." She shrugged. "We'll see about that." 2 days later, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. "Notice of environmental violation," it said. Apparently, I was being fined again, this time for unauthorized shoreline alteration. They claimed I had violated HOA environmental guidelines by disturbing aquatic vegetation. I almost laughed out loud. The so-called disturbance was me clearing out a few weeds near my dock, something I'd done every summer. It was pure harassment, plain and simple. I took the letter straight to my lawyer, who just shook his head. "She's digging herself deeper," he said. "We'll make a call to the county." The next morning, I met with the county environmental officer. He reviewed my property deed, examined the lake boundaries, and quickly confirmed what I already knew. "The HOA has no authority here," he said, flipping through the documents. "This entire lake is private. You can swim, fish, build docks, whatever you like, as long as you don't pollute or block water flow." I grinned. "Would you mind putting that in writing?" he chuckled. "Gladly." He gave me an official county statement, stamped and signed, confirming my ownership and rights. Armed with that, I emailed a copy to the HOA board and included a polite message: "Any further claims regarding the lake will be considered harassment and referred to legal counsel." You'd think that would have ended things, but Karen wasn't done embarrassing herself. The next weekend, I came home from running errands to find a group of people standing near the edge of my property again. This time, it wasn't families with chairs, it was HOA members, clipboards in hand, led by none other than Karen herself. I parked my truck and walked over. "What now?" I asked, already tired. "We're conducting a site inspection," she said in her most official tone. "We've received multiple complaints about your activities affecting community water quality." I laughed, unable to help myself. "You mean my activities on my private lake?" She gave me that smug look again. "It's not as private as you think. This affects everyone's property values." I raised an eyebrow. "You realize you're trespassing, right?" One of the board members looked uneasy. "Maybe we should confirm the jurisdiction first." But Karen snapped, "No, we're within our rights." That was her mistake. Because I had anticipated this nonsense, I installed a few discreet security cameras facing the dock and shoreline. I recorded every moment as they walked past my private property signs, snapping photos and pointing at my dock like it was a crime scene. I didn't say another word. I just let them hang themselves. When they finally left, I sent the footage straight to my lawyer, who forwarded it to the county and the HOA's legal representative with a simple note: "Documented trespassing on private property." By Monday morning, Karen's confidence had evaporated. The HOA sent out a mass email trying to distance themselves from her actions. "The HOA board does not condone unauthorized property inspections," it read. "Future disputes involving private property should be handled through legal channels." but even that didn't stop her. She cornered me in the street later that week, her voice trembling with anger. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "You're ruining this community with your arrogance." I stayed calm. "Karen, you're the one abusing your position. You've fined me twice illegally, trespassed, and harassed me non-stop. It's over." She sneered. "We'll see about that. You can't fight the HOA forever." What she didn't know was that I'd already started making calls to the County Property Commission. During my visits with the officials, I learned something interesting. The HOA's founding documents had several administrative flaws. Specifically, their jurisdiction lines weren't clearly defined on the original filing. That meant certain properties, including mine, were legally exempt from HOA oversight. The best part, because the HOA had falsely claimed my lake as community property in their budget, they were now responsible for a portion of the lake's environmental insurance costs. And since I had proof of my exclusive ownership, they couldn't use my property to justify their spending. My lawyer drafted a formal notice of correction, requesting that the HOA reimburse me for the $1,000 fine and issue a public apology for the false claims. He also copied the county clerk, making it part of the public record. Within days, the HOA was scrambling. Karen called me that evening, her tone suddenly soft and nervous. "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot," she said. "Maybe we can resolve this without legal escalation." I smirked. "You mean without you losing your position?" She didn't answer. "Tell you what," I said, "you can start by withdrawing the fines and admitting you overstepped." She hesitated, then said, "Fine. Consider them withdrawn." But I wasn't done yet. I attended the next HOA meeting, this time prepared. The boardroom was tense. Neighbors whispered as I took my seat, and Karen sat across the table, looking pale and uneasy. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and laid everything out: the trespassing, the false fines, the harassment, and the county confirmation of ownership. Then I showed the footage from my security cameras of her leading the unauthorized inspection. Gasps filled the room. "This," I said, "is the kind of behavior that gives HOAs a bad name. Power trips, lies, and harassment." I turned to the rest of the board. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for accountability." The vote that followed was almost unanimous. Karen was stripped of her position as HOA president and formally reprimanded for her actions. The board issued me a written apology and confirmed that the HOA would never attempt to enforce any regulations on my property again. As for the $1,000 fine, it was refunded with interest. When I walked out of that meeting, Karen wouldn't even look at me. The woman who had once acted like she ruled the entire neighborhood now sat silent and defeated, staring at the table. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered every smug word, every letter, every threat she'd thrown my way. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I looked toward my lake, glowing in the last light of sunset, and smiled. The water was calm again, reflecting the sky perfectly, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. Karen had tried to drown me in her rules, but in the end, she was the one who sank. After Karen was removed as HOA president, the neighborhood fell eerily quiet. People who once followed her around like she was queen of the subdivision now avoided her entirely. It was as if her downfall had sucked the drama right out of the place, and honestly, I was grateful. I went back to enjoying my mornings by the lake, fishing in peace, walking my dog without someone lurking nearby with a clipboard, and finally, living the quiet life I'd built this place for. But deep down, I knew people like Karen don't just give up. They wait, watching for an opportunity to claw back some control. And I was right. She might have lost her position in the HOA, but she hadn't lost her obsession with making my life miserable. It started subtly. The first thing I noticed was a strange smell near the edge of the lake one afternoon. When I went to investigate, I found that someone had dumped a few bags of grass clippings, branches, and even trash into the water. It wasn't much, but it was deliberate. The next day, I found a broken fence post, one that had clearly been kicked in. Then a few days later, an anonymous complaint was sent to the county, claiming I was illegally modifying a natural waterway. The officer who came out to inspect was polite and professional, but he could barely hide his amusement when I showed him the same documents that had shut down the HOA's case before. "Looks like someone's still holding a grudge," he said with a smirk. I sighed. "You have no idea." For a while, it became almost routine. Every week or two, there would be some new stunt trash tossed onto my property, letters sent to the HOA board full of made-up accusations, even tire tracks across the edge of my lawn one morning. I installed more cameras, reinforced the gate, and tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was still trying to find a way to get under my skin. Then one afternoon, I heard voices coming from the dock. When I looked out, I saw two teenage boys swimming in my lake. At first, I thought maybe they were just kids being kids, but when I went down to talk to them, they said, "Karen said this is for everyone now." That was the last straw. I called the HOA immediately, demanding to know if they were behind this nonsense again. The new president, a man named David, sounded exasperated. "We've told her repeatedly to stop involving herself in HOA matters," he said. "She's not on the board anymore. She has no authority." "Well, she's still using your name to trespass on my land," I said. "If this doesn't stop, I'll start pressing charges." He promised to speak with her again, but it was clear she wasn't listening to anyone. So, I decided it was time to end this once and for all. I started by visiting the county office again, where I spoke with the same official who had helped me before. Together, we reviewed every piece of documentation on my property deeds, survey maps, even the environmental permits. Then I had an idea. Since the HOA had repeatedly claimed interest in maintaining the lake, I proposed filing for a water rights reaffirmation, essentially, a legal declaration stating that the lake and its access points were privately owned and controlled exclusively by me. It wasn't cheap, but the moment it was filed, it became a matter of public record. That meant any future complaints, claims, or attempts to use the lake could be immediately dismissed as invalid. When word of that filing got out, it spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone was talking about how the lake officially belonged to me. No HOA oversight, no shared access, no debate. Most of the neighbors congratulated me, saying they were relieved someone had finally put Karen in her place. But she didn't take it well. One evening, as I was cleaning up my tools after repairing the fence, I saw her standing on the road just outside my gate. She didn't say anything at first, just stared, her expression cold. Then she muttered, "You think you're so clever." I didn't bother replying. "You ruined everything," she said. "This used to be a community. Now everyone's divided because of you." I walked up to the gate and leaned on it. "No, Karen," I said quietly. "You ruined it when you tried to take what wasn't yours." She clenched her fists and stormed off, muttering something I couldn't quite hear. A few nights later, I woke up to my dog barking. I checked the cameras and saw movement near the lake. Someone was down by the dock. I zoomed in and there she was, standing on the edge of the water, flashlight in hand, looking around like she was searching for something. I called the sheriff's office immediately. When they arrived, she tried to claim she was checking for environmental violations. The deputy, who knew about the whole situation, wasn't he having it? "Ma'am," he said, "you're trespassing on private property. You need to leave before you get charged." She argued, of course, but in the end, she had no choice but to go. I didn't press charges that night, but the incident was officially logged. The next morning, half the neighborhood knew about it. Apparently, the sight of Karen being escorted off my property by law enforcement had become the talk of the town. She went into hiding for a few days after that, keeping her curtains drawn and her car parked in the garage. Meanwhile, I took extra precautions, posted new private property signs, updated my security system, and even installed motion-triggered lights along the lake's edge. I was done playing defense. Then, in a twist I didn't see coming, the HOA board contacted me again, this time with an unusual request. They wanted to formally transfer all lake-related references out of their charter. In other words, they wanted to erase any mention of the lake from HOA documentation to avoid future legal exposure. I agreed, but I added one condition: they had to include a clause explicitly stating that the HOA had no jurisdiction or authority over my land in any capacity. David agreed immediately, clearly eager to be done with the headache. Once it was signed, the matter was officially closed permanently. As weeks passed, life finally returned to normal. The air around the neighborhood felt lighter, quieter. The petty gossip faded. The board focused on actual community maintenance instead of playing power games. I rebuilt the broken section of the fence, repainted the dock, and even added a few solar lights along the pathway. My lake looked better than ever, shimmering under the afternoon sun. One day, as I sat in my chair, fishing rod in hand, I saw Karen drive past slowly. Her car stopped for a moment, and our eyes met. She looked tired, defeated, but there was something else there, maybe regret. Then she drove off without a word. It was strange. After all the chaos, I didn't feel angry anymore. Just relieved. The constant tension was gone, replaced by the peace I'd wanted from the beginning. The lake was quiet again, just the way it had been before the HOA tried to claim it. Sometimes, when I see the reflection of the trees on the water, I think about how close I came to losing it all, not because of laws or deeds, but because of someone's ego. But in the end, the truth won. The land, the lake, and my peace were all mine again. And as I cast my line into the calm, still water, I couldn't help but smile. The HOA had tried to control me, but they forgot one simple fact: you can't fence in what you don't own.